Yes, this is the Shelter FootyCast from the BackChat Studios. So great to have your company. Mark Redding's in the chair. Our regular GO just been separated for the time being. We've had Busselton at the brilliant Shelter Brewery with Will Schofield. He's gone from Busso to Bali. So he's just having one last look at relaxation before footy starts. But great to have your company. As I said, Mark Redding's alongside Hamish Hammer Brayshaw. Good morning, my friend.
Great, good to be back. Very, very good to be back in the chair.
Absolutely. Let's check off a few important housekeeping duties, of course. Socials at Shelter FootyCast, FootyCast at shelterbrewing.com.au. Of course, the YouTube BackChat Shelter FootyCast with the playlist, the newsfeed coming very shortly, I believe. And also, with the Shelter's Summer of Sour officially over, don't fret. Of course, we had a taste of those down at Busselton last weekend. The Grapes of Mirth is bringing a huge day of comedy to Shelter Brewing tomorrow. It's Australia's preeminent wine and comedy festival. For the first time, 6 of Australia's best comedians will make their way to Shelter Brewing for an afternoon of comedy, music, wine, gourmet grub, and the most amazing festival vibes. 2 o'clock at Shelter, as I said, tomorrow. Tickets available at grapesofmirth.com.au. Shelter, born and brewed in Busselton, WA. I can vouch, and so can Dan and Scully, about the hospitality from the boys last week. From Tommy, Paul, Ash, they were sensational. The food, I actually just thought it was pizza and burgers. Yeah, do that a whole lot. It's outstanding. You've been there?
No, I haven't been there, but I do appreciate a good smorgasbord of food. But along with a nice little beer, it certainly sounds like somewhere I'd like to venture. Maybe tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
Now, about to get your predictions for season 2023, your crystal ball hammer. Mm-hmm. But we've also got the Shelter FootyCast tipping competition, including some prizes. First prize, a $300 Shelter Brewing Company venue voucher, plus $300 worth of Shelter beer plus $300 merch pack. Second prize, $250 worth of Shelter beer plus a $150 merch pack. Good value there. And third, $150 worth of beer and a Shelter hoodie. Plus weekly prizes. Terms and conditions are on the Shelter website. We'll get involved. Have a look on our socials for a link to join the league. I don't know about footy tipping. I'm in them all that I get asked to do, but I get more pissed off about getting 2 out of 9 than I do out of a lot of things. Does it frustrate you?
Oh, it frustrates you when it's within a kick or two and you sort of back the roughie in it. They get up and then they're winning in the fourth and then they lose. I do get very frustrated at footy tipping. I haven't notoriously been very good at it in the last couple of years too, which hurts.
Let's get, before we hit the big moments of the round.
And Skeet, sorry to interrupt. I just want to get one thing in. Now, I know I gave you an outdated run sheet there saying that the new feed was on its way. It's well and truly there and working. So if you are listening to this, podcast through the BackChat feed, you can jump on, just search on Spotify, on Apple, all of the app, the podcast apps. Search for Shelter FootyCast, and it'll come up as its own little house. You go in, follow, subscribe to that, and then in about 3-4 weeks' time, we're going to cut off the BackChat feed from Shelter FootyCast, and you'll only be able to listen to it on the new Shelter FootyCast feed.
Okay, you lost me at Excuse Me Skeet, but I've got you. The feed is up and running, and the only request from Dashing Dan from now on is, how about putting an updated rundown on my computer? But that's been clarified. That's good to hear. Mm-hmm. And as I said, Hammer, before we get into our big moment of the round, this is the last weekend before footy starts. Now, being in the footy system, Eagles training today, Luke Shuey, etc. We'll touch on Jack Darling and, of course, Freo going through their final preparations. Mm-hmm. What does this last weekend mean for players before they mentally and physically have to really switch on for the best part of 4 or 5 months?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on where the player's at. I mean, if you've had a pretty solid pre-season, you've played all the practice games, this is your last weekend to sort of refresh and feel good before launching into a 20-odd week season. So you sort of want to this is a session where you're obviously going to get a number of Ks in the legs, but you want to get through, you want to feel good, then you want to attack next week feeling fresh. Whereas if you've had an interrupted pre-season, this is your last real hit out before the season gets going. So I imagine Luke Shuey would be wanting to get as much out of himself as he can today. There'd be boys that Oscar Allen would be wanting to get as much out of himself as he can today. So there'd be guys going pretty hard at it to try and feel like they're ready to play round one. So it's an interesting mix as to who's had a full pre-season, who's had interrupted pre-seasons. But it's either way, it's a solid session the last day of the pre-season, and then you rest up over the weekend and get into it next week.
Yeah, we'll dig deeper into the West Coast Eagles and Fremantle in just a moment. But the big moments of the round, well, there's a few. Let's touch on the MCG. Lots of footy there next weekend. Yeah. But, of course, they've had to relay so much turf, about 1,000 square metres. In 8 days, less than 8 days, we've got the footy starting. So Thursday, next week, we're going to have the first game between Richmond and Carlton, all because of Ed Sheeran. And, of course, he's performing in Perth on Sunday in front of 75,000. First question: are you going to see
I will
it?
be there. Yep, with bells on, which is that'll be an enjoyable Sunday afternoon. But oh geez, I tell you what, if the turf at Optus has had its issues at the best of times, and if they're going to have to do what they've done at the G, it'll be interesting to see what happens come round 2, 3, 4.
They've got a bit more tie at the sleeve than the G, of course, because we're not having any footy here in round 1. So Sunday, the 12th of March, and then we don't play a game of footy until the Saturday week after that. Yep. So there's a bit more
2
time.
weeks.
So there's planning, and they've known this is the case. But certainly the MCG, it's going to be fascinating to see how that comes up next week. Some huge numbers there. And an Ed Sheeran fan, how's this? You're going to Ed Sheeran, and I'm going to Rod Stewart tomorrow night. Shows the age demographic between the old book and the old bull and the young buck. Ross Lyon. The audio that's been leaked but hasn't been leaked because none of us have heard it.
No one's heard it. Yep.
What's going on there? The coaches, they obviously have a chat, and there was an issue with downloading of the information, but Ross said there was a bit of fruity language, which wouldn't surprise me with Ross. But that's any coaching group.
It's sort of Rocket Will Minson sort of style, and Bill Monahan, there was a bit leaked from the East Freo box. But the coach's box is a high emotional environment. It gets... you get frantic. You're not really worried about what you're saying. It's more you're trying to get your direct message across as quickly as you can. So, for it to have been leaked or suggestively leaked, no one's really heard it. It's a bit unfortunate, but at the same time, you can't expect to be prim and proper all the time, especially not with an old school coach like Ross. It'll sometimes get a bit out of hand, but he always gets his message across as best he can.
End of the day, really, if there's a bit of fruity language, it's as long as it's not anything pertaining to their so-called game plan, then you can...
Yeah, you can excuse it. And as long, no one, you're sitting in the coach's box, very rarely, you're not potting your players personally. It's all to do with the game style. And if it gets a little bit emotional and you ramp up a little bit, well, that's just the way it goes. I think that's just footy.
Yeah, nowadays, so coaches are a little bit more measured. Having done quite a few waffle games sitting in the 7 commentary box, the league coaches, by and large, are fairly calm.
Tame now.
What I find, it's normally the match before the reserves coaches are going off their heads. And it's like you think to yourself, put this in perspective in terms of where it sits in the order of footy importance, but to them it's
absolutely
they're 3 hours of real passion.
Yeah, correct. Doesn't matter whether you're playing league, ammos, or resis. It's all a game of footy that you want to win. So coaches can get emotional and can get up and about, but no, it's all what happens in the box stays in the box. And unfortunately, it's been leaked, but you get that.
What about the news coming out from the AFL, the McClellan Trophy, which goes back to, I suppose, VFL days and AFL times, the Premier Club, when I say Premier Club, the club that earns the most wins and points during the home and away season gets the trophy for that. It's been expanded this year, the AFL, obviously, and now the AFLW. So, not sure if you've heard about this, but I think it's $1 million in the offing here. But if you go to 2022, I know you're working at the West Coast Eagles.
Yep.
So Melbourne would have won the McClellan Trophy last year.
Yep.
Do you know where the Eagles finished?
I'll
tell you where. They finished 18th.
Yep.
So wooden spoon.
Yep.
Because you won 2 games in the men's.
Uh-huh.
And how many in the women?
We won 2 in the women's.
Yeah. So
is it like the Melbourne Cup sweep? If you come last, you get your money back. Is that how?
I don't know.
Is that how it goes?
I've got no idea. But what do you think? $1 million? It's a fair carrot.
It is. And Melbourne won it last year, and you could almost write your own ticket for them again this year. They've. I'm not sure if you're up to date with the sign trade and the pre-signings of the AFLW, but. The 3 premier teams in Adelaide, Melbourne and Brisbane. Brisbane have lost 3 or 4 of their best players. Adelaide have lost a couple of theirs, and no one's touched Melbourne. So they're looking like they'll win every game by 100 points again this year in the AFLW. But they're I think it's a good incentive now that all teams have got AFL and AFLW. It's just an extra added bonus to get the clubs to support both men and women's footy. It's a little carrot of $1 million at the end of the year is not too bad. So I think it's a good incentive to sort of prop up both of the AFL and AFLW teams.
Yeah, my concern is, as you said, the AFLW is a bit compromised at the moment with the recruiting. So, it's a good idea. I think it'll incentivise clubs to really put work into, well, we know the AFL has a lot of work, but clubs that may not have paid as much attention to the AFLW program, I think that's very quickly changing. But that will soon be, $1 million is $1 million. Now, speaking of dollars and compensation and legal action, concussion in footy's taken another step forward.
Yes,
Liam Picken played nearly 200 games for the Western Bulldogs, premiership player, but he suffered a few bouts of concussion. He's taking the AFL, the Bulldogs, I think even club doctors to court or seeking legal compensation over how he's physically deteriorated since his retirement. This is going to turn into not just this story per se, but the concussion issue's got so much growth from a legal perspective.
It does. I think looking at concussions, I mean, my brother Angus has had a number of concussions where he missed games, missed almost a full season through concussions. It's a area of medicine that you're still learning about it and things afterwards. So CTE, you don't understand that until you've passed on. But it's just growing and growing and growing in knowledge. And what Liam Picken retired. How many years ago did he finish up? A few. I mean, concussions that he had in 2014. The technology from now to then is chalk and cheese. So what would have just been righto, you follow my finger. How many fingers am I holding up? Okay, you can play next week. Is now righto. We've got 12 days, but even that still we're not sure on the science behind. So legally, it's a tricky one because I mean I'm not a lawyer, but I can't imagine it's day and night and black and white as to how this case will go. It's certainly something to tread carefully around and something that clubs are putting a lot of work into to make sure that the player is definitely right before they head back out. But yeah, it's a grey area, and it's certainly something that's going to be rampant over the next few years with guys coming out after their careers and having these concussion issues. I mean, West Coast have had Dan Venables and Brad Shepherd, and there's a number of guys in the AFL who have had to sort of finish up early because of concussion issues. So it's definitely a big deal.
Absolutely. I suppose in many ways, though, in more recent times it's changed, but players may have been concussed. Doctor comes out, no, I'm fine, Doc, I'm all good. Hammer says, no, I'm right to go. They obviously there's the balancing act with getting a result on the field, and so players also have always pushed the envelope to stay out on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's you want to be playing football, you want to win, and sometimes with concussion it can be the minorest or the smallest little detail that maybe I saw a star for 1 second, or maybe I can't remember what happened in this one instance, and you think, oh, well, that's just a normal game, I'm tired, whereas, that can be a sign of a concussion. I think gone are the days where the doctor comes out and says, how'd you get here today, mate? And you say, well, February. And then, okay, well, no, you keep going, you're right to go. I think that's, no worries, mate, sit yourself down. But players certainly want to push the envelope and come out. If you're feeling like you've got a concussion, some guys sort of sit there and don't say anything and have their 5 minutes on the bench and then go back out. So it's... players are still very, very hesitant to speak up when they think they've got the smallest little symptoms and they just want to keep playing because 4 points is 4 points and guys are pretty desperate to get it.
But also, and look, playing devil's advocate here, isn't, I think Sco and I have discussed this as well, when you run out onto a football field, it's like when I drive a car, there's you put the seatbelt on, if you're driving the speed limit, you can still have an accident.
Yeah.
It is... Look, and I know there's legal implications. Speaking of someone like Phil Narkle, who had the helmet back in the
big
in
motorbike
day.
helmet.
Yeah, the big mushroom. Yeah, and he was concussed. But of course, back then there was no education, and there was you get pole action, you'd come back on the field, and that might have happened 10 times in say his career. But now, I mean, players do know, and they always have, obviously, the danger. So how do you balance that up with players looking back and saying, well, I didn't get treated appropriately by the doctor. Having said that, I refuse to come off the ground as well. I mean, that's I suppose, a discussion point in all of this, but the AFL has to get up to speed with this quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's more of an issue for the lawyers and the legal side of things. But, I mean, without necessarily signing on the dotted line, you go out to play AFL footy knowing full well that you can get injured, and concussions are part of that. So I think both parties have got, a sort of what's the word?
Obligation.
An obligation to sort of protect themselves, but at the same time, they're both opting into what is a contact sport that can lead to injuries.
This is the Shelter FootyCast with Hammer and Skeet. Right, let's jump into the West Coast Eagles, Fremantle Dockers, and we've just gleaned over the issue of training today and who's up and who's about. Now, some of the names that I guess the Dockers are looking at for round one, Peter Bell speaking on SEN, talking about the likes of Jackson, Ryan, Frederick, Walters. I know you're not at the club regularly, but of that group, I mean, looks like, speaking of concussion, Luke Jackson will be okay.
Yep, he'll be good to go, I imagine.
Look, Ryan's got the bad back, but again, apparently training well enough to suggest he was just been a precautionary measure.
Yep, that's I've heard similar things. I think he's a very important player to them, and I don't think you'd risk him unless he was 100%. But I think he'll push through today, and then he's got a whole week to freshen up. I imagine he'd be right to go.
Michael Frederick's upped his speed at training. I believe the quad's been an issue. I suspect he's so important to them just because he can play up the ground but also hurt you deep. Do you think he'll run out against the Saints?
I don't know. I mean, with his explosive pace, and if he's got leg or soft tissue issues, he's you wouldn't want to risk him at 80% for it to hurt again and then be out for 4 weeks. So I'd sort of say 50-50 on him, but certainly exciting, and you'd love to see him out there on next Saturday.
And my guess is that Michael Walters, 32 years of age, Achilles issues, hasn't played a practice match. There's two things with this. I think he's unlikely to play against the Saints because of his fitness, but also, is he still? I mean, his career's been outstanding, but given he's crafty, his speed has obviously been lessened in recent years, as happens with age. When you've got Switkowski, when you've got Schultz, small forwards, and Frederick potentially as a hybrid sort of small forward, some Walters have to fight for his place this year in the side?
Oh, I think he does. But at the same time, I think he just adds a level of class and X factor that these younger guys are still developing. And he's what is he, 32 now? He's getting a bit older, but he's still got enough dash. He can still jump on someone's head, and he still draws the attention of the best small defender. And I think that is it allows these younger guys to develop and play better footy. But he also gives leadership on ground, and I think his presence on field is certainly something that helps put his case forward for selection. I don't think he'll play next weekend. He's got a bit of time to sort of get himself back and ready to go. But, I think if he's fit and healthy, he's in their best 22.
Gee, you sound like you've got some good contacts at Fremantle.
Yeah, I've got one good one.
You just keep saying he's in, he's out, he's out. Anyway.
I'm just guessing here.
Hammer's guessing.
I speculate.
He speculates. I reckon he's going to be right on a few of those. But the interesting one also, Jager O'Meara, David Mundy. It looks like a seamless transition. Early days, or Mundy.
Jager O'Meara, the best specimen in the history of the world.
He's a good. I know you've got a bit of a man crush.
Just a perfect person, isn't he? Just everything about him. Oh, love him. Anyway, he seems a good fit for our Dockers. I think it's a tough gap to fill, Mundy. It's a very big shoe to fill. The career savers at that for old Dave, but. No, he slotted in well. I think he adds experience and also a real class around that midfield and helping, Brodie, Andrew and Caleb to develop and grow their own game. And I think it's probably not like for like, but I think you get enough out of the replacement there to sort of see the development of that team go forward still.
One of the big revelations at the Dockers in recent times has been that Sam Switkowski is now in charge of the playlist at the club. This is obviously pre-game.
Yep.
I don't know if you know much about Switter and his musical taste. Did you the club you've been at, be it Waffle, AFL, is there a person in charge of the tunes pre-game?
Yep, there is. There's a designated playlist person. I think it's Luke Shuey in the AFL. I did it at Waffle for a couple of years, and mine was more sort of slow rock to start with, or like Foo Fighters, Red Hot Chili Peppers, building up to sort of Metallica and Limp Bizkit, and then we'd run out to Down with the Sickness by Disturbed. So
just go back. What's that last band and song you said?
Disturbed.
Down with the
Sickness by Disturbed. There's Scully's. That's one of Scully's favourite. But that this year I'll be including obviously a little bit of the Southern River Band in that to get us going. But yes, start with early rock and roll, get heavier, and by the end of it you're all screaming and running out. Luke Shuey's more of a techno guy, but I'm not sure what Switter's music taste is, but I'm imagining it's something special if they've given him the reins.
Yeah, okay. I would have chucked a bit of Kenny Rogers. I'm sort of
course, yeah.
Just ease our way into
Got to know when to hold them.
Yeah, a bit of that. A little bit of Kiss going back in time. Maybe a bit of Rod Stewart if you think I'm. Do you think I'm sexy? But yeah, different eras.
Different eras. I mean, I don't mind those songs. Probably not something to run out to. But I'll be interested to see what Andrew reckons of Switter's playlists. Andrew's a bit all over the shop with his music taste, so I'll be so interested to see if Switter can hit the mark. I'm sure he will be.
Alex Pearce as captain. He attended the Captain's Day yesterday on Thursday. He looks like he's tailor-made for the role, and if he stays fit, you can just tell there's a lot of respect amongst the group.
Yeah, I think so. He was very well spoken on the across all socials the other day. But I think listening to what Andrew says about him, he's very, very well respected. Firstly, I think he can demonstrate his leadership on and off the field. He stepped in for Nat Fyfe really well last year and just sort of cemented himself as almost that fill-in captain to take over the role. But no, I think he's the perfect man for the job, and I think he'll do a really, really good job, and he'll guide those Andrew Sarong and Hayden Young, these younger leaders that they've got up and coming. I think he'll guide them and really put Freo in a good spot for the next sort of 5 to 10 years.
Speaking of the captain, he was asked about the musical choice of Switkowski, just going back to that briefly. He said, I'm pretty happy with anyone as long as it's not Sean Darcy.
Yep.
I can't have Sean on the tunes. He's a country boy.
He is, yep.
It's like a So Fresh album from 2010. So, you know, the best of the hits, I don't mind there.
No, they're fine. I can see that. Sean Darcy sipping on a cruiser, no sugar, and enjoying himself a nice little bit of Britney Spears or something like that. Oh, Darcy.
All right, okay. But one guy that I think let's talk briefly about who's going to have a big year at Fremantle.
Yep.
I'll let you put your name out there. I've seen a bit of Josh Tracy in Waffle. The size of the bloke, the leg that he's got, if he can just put that together on a regular basis at AFL level, that's, you know, a question mark that a lot of young forwards get. He, for me, is one. Have you got someone either separately or
I agree with you on Tracy. I mean, I think I've played him 3 times or 4 times in the Waffle, and he's kicked 7, 6 and 5 on us in those occasions. So I think he'll have a really good year. I really like the way that he's gone about it. In terms of who else I think will stand up, I think you'll get a lot out of Hayden Young. I know he had a good year last year, had a little bit of some inconsistencies with injuries across the last couple of years, but if he has a full season together, I think he'll challenge for Freo's best and fairest. I think he'll be right up there in terms of potentially being in that All-Australian squad if he has a really good year. I like the way he goes about it off a half-back flank. I think they're going to try and set up rebounding through him. I like his left foot, obviously, so does everyone, but he's going to develop into some sort of player, and I can really see this year springboarding him into being one of those better halfbacks in the comp.
Okay, who kicks the most goals for Freo this year? Taberner, my man Tracy, Amos, or Nathan Fife?
Yeah, I've been saying this about Fife for a little bit now. I can see him quite comfortably having 100 shots on goal this year, and whether or not he kicks them or not is something that has questioned him in the past. But I'll say Fife will kick their most this year. He'll have 100 shots, and if he kicks 40 to 50 of them, I think that's
big result.
Big result for him.
Where do they finish? They play finals, obviously, in your mind?
Yep, I do. I think they'll play finals pretty convincingly, and I reckon they'll finish, I'm going to say 3rd.
Isn't it funny? Reading Herald Sun tipsters and Melbourne experts, a lot of them left the Dockers out of the 8, and they've got Tim Watson had St Kilda 8th, which, you know what, he could well be proven correct. But you look at some of a lot of them have actually just tipped the same 8 from last year, which generally doesn't happen. No. And Fremantle's one of those sides, but you've got them finishing 3rd, so improvement.
Yeah, I've got them finishing 3rd. I think their improvement, I think, this year comes from just having another 25 games into their younger players. I think a lot of them, I've said this a few times, I think the golden age is sort of an average age of 26 is your premiership window for most sides if you look at it. But while they're not at that age yet, they've got the games to back it up. They're a young side, but have had to play these young players in the last few games. So Andrew's played 100 games and he's 23. So there's a lot of guys at sort of 23, 24 that have played 50 to 100 games. So I think they've got the experience without having the age, and I think that'll with that youth, that'll set them up to have a really good year.
The shift focus, the West Coast Eagles. Before we talk about round 1 and some of the players you're looking at in terms of maybe an emerging draftee, Eagles supporters, and my mum rang me, and she's an Eagles nuffy, I'll call her that, and she said, oh no, another horrible year. Off the back of a practice match against Adelaide Crows. That can be the most inopportune time to look at a team.
Correct.
Is in pre-season. But there has to be tiny bits of concern out of what you saw last Friday.
Oh, well, I mean, little bits, but also not really. I mean, looking back at it, the NAB Cup, Carlton used to win that straight sets and then just be nowhere through the year. So it's really, I don't think it has much bearing more than just getting fitness into your players. I think looking at West Coast, you sort of take some positives and you take some negatives out of the weekend, but you forget about it pretty quick and look forward. I think they're Scully's been pretty bullish on them finishing in the top 8. I think they're right around the mark challenging. The way I think they're going to present themselves this year is a different look. They're going to have a lot of youth in there. I've spoken a lot about Ruben Jinby. I think he's going to be a star. Haven't spoken a lot about Campbell Chesser, but he's a smooth mover that's got himself fit again. So I think in terms of standout or players that are going to break out and have a really good year, I can see him for one that I haven't spoken about going, really, really well this year. But no, I see them finishing anywhere from sort of 12th to 7th. I've got them in that range, and I think they can definitely be challenging for finals if things go their way.
And again, practice match. Oh, they're leaking goals last week, and that was supposedly with the likes of Gov and Tommy Barras in defence and Shannon Hearn. So that was an issue against the Crows. My concern going forward, particularly if Jack Darling is injured, where do the goals come from?
Yeah, I think, well, you've still got players like Oscar Allen and Jake Waterman who can be tall forwards that can lead and take marks. Jack Darling's obviously a really important piece to the puzzle with Kennedy gone. He'll draw your best defender. He's obviously been a star player for a long time, but I think you can get a number of goals out of Oscar Allen this year if he stays fit. I think Jake Waterman can kick goals. I think Liam Ryan's looking really good and looking to have his form of previous years. So I think you'll be able to find enough goals. I don't think you're going to have a Jeremy Cameron or a Tom Hawkins who's going to pop up and kick 50 to 60. I think you're going to have more of a
scoring by committee. Yeah,
I think you're going to have a Melbourne-style spread where you're going to have a lot of players popping up and hopefully kicking around that 25 to 40 mark. Well, that'll really set the boys on for a good year.
Concerned about the lack of ruck options without Big Nick Nat if he doesn't start against North, for instance?
I'm concerned a little bit, but I think at the same time you've had a midfield that's been with and without Nick Nat for the last sort of 4 or 5 years, so they're used to rucking and sharking the opposition. But I think Cal Jamison's come on really well. I think Bailey Williams is still developing, and he's a young kid that can jump over a house. So there's plenty of options if Nick doesn't go down. Obviously, you'd like to have him in because he's a star, but I think they'll fare well with or without him.
Okay, just quick sort of Q&As here.
Yep.
John Worsfold medalist, albeit we're in March.
Oh, Ruben Ginby.
Ruben Ginby.
My guy.
That's going to be the rising star.
Ruben Ginby, thank you.
Most goals? Ruben, no.
Nah, not most. I think most goals, Oscar Allen this year.
Okay, you've got him just surpassing Jack. I mean, if they're both kicking 30 or 40, they're in the conversation.
Yeah, no question. I think Oscar will win it based on the fact that Jack will take the better defender for the majority of the year.
Okay, you've sort of teased us about the finals position. How many wins? Where do they finish?
I reckon they'll have 12 wins and finish 8th.
12th wins, finish 8th. They'll sneak in by percentage.
They'll sneak in by percentage. I'm not, to be honest with you, I've lost track of how many games and how many buys, so I don't know what really there is, how many games there actually are in the season. But I'm 12 wins and they'll finish 8th on percentage.
Hit me up with 3 predictions for the year in its totality. Premiers?
Yep, Melbourne.
Brownlow medalist?
Christian Petrarca.
Oh, okay. And the wooden spoon?
Hawthorn.
So the Demons to have a get back on track.
Yeah. I was in Melbourne over Christmas and was having dinner at Angus's house, and Christian came over, and it was like a bloke cut like a park statue, Adonis chiseled out of stone. I've never seen anything like it. Fit as a fiddle and just looked like he's ready to just kill someone and dominate. And I think even injury free, he'll be unstoppable this year.
Hammer declaring Melbourne morals for 2023.
Yep.
But I'll tell you one bloke that surprised me in the West today, the lift out, 48-page glossy. Jake Waddell and the team did a super job. All the tipsters were there and they gave previews about every team. One bloke has tipped the Eagles to win the flag.
Okay. Who would that be? That'd be Justin Langer on the board.
Justin Langer. JL, we love JL.
Oh, he knows a lot about footy. Back him in. Sometimes you got to throw a Hail Mary out there and watch it right at home. Penzance style.
Even Josh Kennedy, who finished playing last year, he tipped Geelong to win the flag.
Yep.
But JL, the only, I think, tipster in the world to have tipped the Eagles to win the premiership this year.
I like it, JL. Going out on a limb and putting himself out there.
That's like going to him as an opener to face the West Indies without a helmet. It's like, you just don't do it.
Some can, and he's obviously one of them. So I'll back him in. He'll put the first one over mid off for 6. It's a nice little lofted cover drive. Thank you very much. But there you go. JL out on a limb.
Good on him. Board member, but he's sticking fat with the West Coast Eagles. This is the Shelter FootyCast, Hammer and Skeet. AFL Captain's Day, we'll touch on that pretty briefly because it's where the AFL asks for the voting of all the skippers and who's going to make the grand final, etc., etc. Fremantle got 12 skippers who think they can play finals, which sounds about right.
Yep, that's thereabouts.
Not one skipper thinks the Eagles, no rival skipper thinks the Eagles can play finals, which probably sounds about right.
Well, a lot of the skippers are not from Perth, so I'll give it to them, sure.
And Geelong, obviously, I think 8 captains think that they'll make the grand final, which, mate, put it this way. So I read during the week that you'd look at what Melbourne did in 2021 where they thrashed Geelong, they thrashed Dogs in the grand final. Pretty similar to what, Geelong did to Sydney in the grand final.
Yep.
It doesn't always transpire that the Premier's come out firing, or there might be more injuries. It's predictable to say Geelong, but I concur with you. I think there's
there's other teams that can challenge. I mean, the top 4 or 5 sides have all looked like they've bettered themselves over the off-season. So, I mean, Geelong have added a few players and have stayed healthy. They have lost Selwood, but you look at Melbourne, they've added Grundy. You look at Richmond, they've added Taranto and guys like that. So all these good sides will get better. But, no, it's not just a certainty to say, well, you've won the flag one year, you're going to be in it the next. So, but I think it's a pretty safe bet that they'll be right up there.
Absolutely. They're a good side. And so many new captains, 9 skippers, I think, of the 18. Half the group. And I'm looking forward to seeing Toby Green to see whether he can balance his captaincy duties with not being a lunatic and belting blokes.
A hothead. I hope he sort of treads the line. But at the same time, you
I love him.
You love Toby Green because he does flirt with that line and he plays on edge. So I think the players respect him for it. So I hope, without being suspended, I think I'd like to see him tight wire that line for a little bit longer.
Beautiful. Talking footy here, Shelter FootyCast, as we swing into our last part of the show, where we talk a bit about other sports. Hammer, you and I love our cricket. Big day for the Aussies today, 4 for 255.
Massive day.
Big day, winning the toss. We won 3 tosses in this series. Can you believe it that after 3 test matches, the team that's won the toss and batted has lost, which seems extraordinary in India.
Well, it does. I mean, you look at the pitch and the last few pitches probably make sense. But no, it is. That's an extraordinary statistic when you look at it.
Now, Usman Khawaja, what a performance by him. He's 104 not out when play resumes today. Cam Green, 49 not out, 4 for 255. 10 years ago, he was part of Homework Gate with Mickey Arthur, got dropped from a test match in India. And then, of course, since he's come back into the test team 2 years ago, no one has scored more test runs for Australia. He's averaging 69. He scored 600s in 15 tests. This bloke he's a likeable bloke.
A lovable fella. He's in a rare vein of form, isn't he?
And his first test century yesterday against India, and also, of course, in India. So we've got one opener sorted. We don't have the second opener sorted. But what's the plan for day 2? We've got that 255 on the board. This looks like a 450 pitch.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's certainly about as wicket. And I think looking at Khawaja, he's obviously a Labor supporter because he's doing it for Albanese in the crowd. But I think he continues. You build your innings around him at the moment. If he can get to, I think he'll challenge a double 100 if he can. Get 450, 500, and if you can do that, then throw the stumps at him. Go for it. You've got to go hard at India here. I think the Australians have set themselves up and then crumbled in the second innings. So it's got to be a big score here to really challenge the Indians. But I think anywhere 400 plus will be a good score for us, and then really have a crack at them.
Yeah, bat after tea. Hopefully Cam Green can get 100 over there. Look, he's so important to that side because he can come on and we can open the bowling essentially, which I'm presuming he will do alongside Mitch Stark, and then of course the spinners hopefully come into play. But the pitch a lot better. But you're right, Albo and the Indian Prime Minister. The actual stadium's named after him. The Indian Prime Minister.
They went. The fans were going bananas.
Imagine if that happened at the MCG, where the 2 Prime Ministers on Boxing Day did a tour like a lap of honour. There'd be cans of VB.
And certainly wouldn't go down like a lead
or
balloon.
Shelter in our case. Yeah. There would be booing and they were cheering.
They were cheering. They were loving it. And they went round on they did their lap of honour. They went up in the crowd. Albo was giving it to the camera. It was beautiful. Perfect little start to the day.
130,000 that stadium holds. But guess what? They've never filled it. The most has been for an IPL final of about 110. So God knows when they're going to fill it. But 130,000 can fit into that section. But the Aussies hopefully on the way to drawing a test match there. Finish up quickly. The Glory play tonight against the Wanderers. They're in 11th spot. HBF Park, just around the corner from here. Back in action for the Glory. So good to see the boys in action. 7,000 fans expected there. And the Western Force have got Moana Pacifica. They got belted 70-20 essentially by the Queensland Reds last weekend. That wraps up our Shelter FootyCast. I think Scully's just about to have his first shelter up in Bali. He's given the Bintang the flick and going straight to the shelter, as we will over the course of the weekend. Of course, socials at Shelter FootyCast, FootyCast at shelterbrewing.com.au. YouTube BackChat, Shelter FootyCast. It's now online anywhere you want to find it. Dan's doing his best work. Thanks to the boys. Thanks to Zeb for getting me home safely on that little small plane, 4 seats last week, as Scully was hoping for donuts and Dan sitting next to me, and I'm thinking, My God, get me home alive. We got through that. We got through the
Well
pizza making. We jumped off the jetty. We made absolute tools of ourselves. We had a lot of fun, as we always do with you, Hammer.
Thank you very much for having me, Skate. It's been good.
Hamish Brayshaw. Catch you next time.